those conversations, share your business card, your email address, whatever folks want to share, and we'll get into it. All right, thank you for your focus. We have a few advocacy items tonight we want to get into, but I do want everyone to know if you have something you want to share, exhibition, something you're working on, a special event, feel free, raise your hand, we'll get you a microphone and you can share. You want to start, you want to kick us off?
Hi, I'm Jackie Lewis. I know many of you from the Athenaeum or Leadership Philly, but today I have the hat for next year's 250th, the semi-quincentennial. Philly is recruiting 10,000 Philly enthusiasts called Fanbassadors. And the idea is to take people like you who love Philly and engage you around next year's happenings. It's just an email list. You don't get paid. You might get free tickets. You might get invited to a happy hour. You might even, I got to film a promo with the captain of the Philly Union. That was pretty cool. Alejandro is even cuter in person. We have 5,000 people signed up. We need another 5,000. But I knew that Eli had convened 50 Philly enthusiasts right here tonight at DAG. So this is low-hanging fruit. All around you will see a little QR code. Use your phone. Just put your name and your email. We'll count you. You can unsubscribe next week. I won't know, right? I'm not the email police, but I think it's going to be a great year. You're already doing the work. So please, please help us get to 10,000. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Paul. Marcia's on my list, so I'm getting to her.
Make it quick. Paul Steinke, Preservation Alliance, 2 events coming up. One will be in this room on Thursday, the 3rd Annual Sustainability Forum. AIA, ULI, Green Build, and the Preservation Alliance are collaborating on this event. And it's Thursday. Tickets are still available on any of our websites, ULI, AIA, Green Build, or the Preservation Alliance. Please join us in this space. And then a month later, on October 29th, we are putting on a symposium on the future of the Roundhouse, the police administration building in someone's council district. October 29th at WHYY's studios on North 6th Street. So tickets for that are also available. We just closed the call for proposals, and I'm pleased to support that we got 31 proposals in. And our jury is meeting in early October to decide which ones to put forward to the symposium. So please join us for that and help us figure out the future of maybe one of Philadelphia's greatest modern era buildings, which is now empty. All right, back to you.
Thank you, Paul. DAG did submit to that, so we'll see if we made the cut. Angela, you want to? Yes, come. You got it louder. Here, let me give you the mic.
Good evening. My name is Angela, and I have to do this because it is my job. But on Saturday, this Saturday, September 27th, from 10 to 3 is the annual Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation's annual housing fair. So if you know anyone that's looking for any kind of housing resources, please join us. It will be at Temple University in the Airmax Center and all day. So anything housing counseling, all the things, they'll be there. Come on out.
Everyone in here should know Angela. She was our presenter just a few months ago. Ariel.
Good evening. Happy New Year to anyone celebrating. My name is Ariel, and I'm a historic preservation advocate in the greater Philadelphia area. If anyone is interested in helping me save a very important arts and crafts style house in Bryn Mawr with the oldest purpose-built attached car garage, home to 2 female Bryn Mawr College alumni who worked in STEM and lived together there for over 40 years, and it is at risk of being demolished by an evil water company, please ask Eli for my contact information. Thank you.
I wanted to give a shout out to DA Larry Krasner's office for a recent event. They had 3 town halls on the topic of public space in Philadelphia and protests in light of the potential for National Guard troops, et cetera. But it was Larry speaking, but also community leaders and activists updating about questions of violence and nonviolence in various kinds of ways. I thought it was a really moving and effective and empowering event. That I was at the one at Mother Bethel last week. There were 2 others. In the middle of it, Larry said, "Oh, we should do more of these." I checked on this afternoon on their Instagram. I didn't see any set up yet, but I would follow the DA's office for ways that we can participate in our streets. He had some practical suggestions, like to support protest in ways that his office could. One of the tips was, if you're protesting a change in signage at the President's House site, you might choose to go on the city side of the street and not the federal one. Good to know.
Hi there. I just want to put in a plug for the Northwest Trails Summit. That's going to be this Saturday from 9:30 to about noonish, unless you, it's at Venice Island in Manayunk, Saturday the 27th. And then there's going to be either an optional bike ride or a walk after afternoon that you can attend.
You're on the steering committee.
Well, Calder Gardens opened on Sunday. How many of you have seen it, have been there? Then you know that it's almost a sacred place. It felt like a cathedral. And then with the exalting artwork, it was truly inspiring. And many of you may remember that several years ago, DAG hosted a Zoom meeting with Herzan and Muren. And I think we were from Switzerland. And I think we were among the first to see the initial plans, and that was something.
Hi, while we're on self-promotion, my name is Reed Bendit. I'm in the process of opening a comedy club at Broad and Washington Ave with the help of Councilman Squilla. It's been nothing but supportive during the whole process. And that's kind of all I wanted to put out there. I just want to bring some entertainment to South Philadelphia that's smaller than stadium size. So hopefully this year it'll happen. Claude's Comedy Club.
All right. Any others? George, do you want to jump in, say a few things?
I'll go up there. First, I'm going to talk very briefly about the President's House. I think everybody here is probably familiar with our position on it, which I won't belabor you with. But a number of us have been to multiple other meetings convened by other organizations throughout the city, and the federal government was supposed to announce its plans last Wednesday, but they did not. And we are planning a forum on November 12th. Marcia is coordinating this with Michael Kaward, the founder of Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, Roz McPherson invited, and Troy Leonard, who is the president of Kelly Maiello. And of course, many of us know Emmanuel Kelly, my great friend, who was on our steering committee and gave many of the what turned out to be the latter years of his life to that project. So that's the story as far as I know it at the moment. What I have here, very briefly, I'm going to go very fast because I know we're ready to start the program, is why we can't have nice things here in Philadelphia. This was a drawing from 2017 for the juncture between, or the connection between the 30th Street Amtrak station and the 30th Street SEPTA station, which many years ago, a lot of people here will remember, had a very grim tunnel connecting it. That grim tunnel was closed with no solution found. And many of us were very happy to see proposals such as this one. Okay, I pushed the arrow and nothing happened. Okay, keep talking. Sorry. Sorry. Here was another view of a later version of that mall connecting the two locations with a different top. This one, the first one was from Gensler. The second one was from Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. And okay. Okay. I didn't notice what you did carefully. Okay, there we go. This was one of the later plans from Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, and you'll see that there's no skylight, there's no evidence of anything underground, although there is a lot of public space. Sorry. And unfortunately, here is the latest plan, which adds yet another driveway similar to what's there now to the location. So after the expenditure of literally millions of dollars in design fees, we're back to something very close to what we had in the 80s. And I'm not presenting this to blame the architects. They were doing what their client insisted that they do, and there were constraints. But I wish we could have nice things. Most other cities would never have interrupted a tunnel connecting two major nodes such as this. So that's the end of that little diatribe.
DAG has not at this point. All right, we'll discuss it, yeah. All right, so two things and then we'll get started. Do you? Correct. Correct. The tunnel would have been to connect the subway and the Amtrak regional rail station. So right now, there is no plans for that. Yeah, you got to come out across the street and go back down. All right, so last things, and then we'll get into it. This space is for sale. So as of 2026, we are off to new environs. So stick with us. We are in the planning stages of where that will be. We will not be shy about telling you where we are, but we will be in a new place starting next year. But we do have a few more events this year. Thursday, October 23rd, we're on Zoom. So that'll be a virtual event with Joe Forkin from the Delaware River Waterfront Corporation, talking about what's going on along the Delaware. Back here, as George mentioned, on November 12th to talk about the President's House. And then we're going to close out the year with John Fry on December 17th, talking about North Broad, Temple, and kind of whatever he wants to talk about. So with that, we're going to have a Q&A. I'm going to change roles and sit down now. It's a pleasure to welcome Councilman Mark Squilla here to DAG. Not your first time here with us, but we are very appreciative of having you give your time to us. And I'll jump in with a couple soft ones and ease you into it, and then we'll go to the hard ones. So in your mind right now in District 1, what are the three sort of biggest projects, initiatives, things that are on your mind on a kind of day-to-day basis?
First, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. Thank DAG for what you do. It's really important to have designers and planners and ideas through the city. And I want to disagree because I do think we could have nice things in Philadelphia. Sometimes we make it harder for ourselves, but we can do good things with your advocacy and continue that model. But as far as initiatives and projects, I think they're two different things. And, you know, we went through a long will do as far as initiatives, a long process for a downtown arena that was proposed for East Market Street. And from that, came a lot of challenges and concerns from the community. What the arena would bring, what negative impacts the arena would bring, but it also brought a lot of ideas, and those conversations, I think, led to opportunities. And I think the opportunity is that we've been waiting 7 months for is a planning process for East Market Street, right? What does that look like? How do we make sure that we have people who are stakeholders in the process, property owners, but also planners, community members, and what do we want to see East Market look like? From the project, the proposal of the arena, as they're building the arena down in South Philadelphia, Comcast and HPSC, the 76ers, have joined forces in a joint venture to not only build the arena, but also purchase some of those properties on East Market Street, which is a big bonus, but we want to make sure that there's a planning process that is put in place that would take the ideas of all stakeholders, all community members, designers, and developers to look at what East Market Street could look like. It's a little disappointing it's taken so long to put that process together. I had reached out to the administration back in mid-December, even before the arena cancellation or movement was, and said, let's put this process together because we knew the possibility was whether the arena comes or the arena doesn't come, we need a plan for East Market Street, right? And it's still unfortunate we don't have that they could have been working all this time up to now to put a proposal together. We have, the Wanamaker building is going to be a great project and a lot of good things happening there. But to me, a planning process is something we need to do immediately. I reached out to the administration again and shared with them that I'm interested in starting it by introducing a resolution. I'm hoping that will spur the interest in them to initiate this. We had heard maybe 3 or 4 months ago that there was going to be a leader in Jerry Sweeney that was going to lead this task force. I met with him several times, and it just doesn't seem to be really moving. But something we need to do now, because we need a short-term vision from East Market for 2026. And if they're going to be able to demolish some of those properties, we could maybe activate, either if they don't demolish it, activate those storefronts. If they do, maybe activate a beer garden, some type of event space, something on East Market that could really initiate 2026 so that we could showcase our city in a great light. But that's an initiative. There's other initiatives that we're dealing with, which still is quality of life issues on the city. We have still a lot of unhoused. I represent part of Kensington. We have a lot of unhoused individuals that have major mental health and addiction issues. And we've done a lot to try to address that, but we still have some of the similar policies in place that make it very difficult to get these individuals help. And by not getting them help, we end up with some of the negative consequences or negative impacts on the communities where we have these individuals that are on the street. And, we hear a lot about individuals that have challenges and what we can do to help them. But what we have been doing isn't really helping them, right? The goal is we have great outreach workers, great nonprofits that work as far as feeding and looking at mental health issues and trying to provide services. But what we end up doing at the end is that most people refuse those services. So to refuse those services, our policy was then just, live on the street and do what you can. But to me, we're not a third world country. We need to come up with a way that we can engage these individuals. We did it through some court processes where people who get in trouble, we created an AMP court, a wellness court, so that we could do assessments of these individuals to see what their needs are. But we also need to do it where people do not get locked up or people do not commit a crime. How do we get them the help and resources we can? How do we work with helping people who really have a hard time making a decision on their own? These are really tough, challenging questions that we don't have an answer for at this point. The state is looking at some 302 possibilities and other things of how we could work with individuals who are in danger to themselves or in danger to others. And And we have a lot of opportunities, I think, in the city, and the mayor has put a lot of money through council efforts to open up a wellness center. And that wellness center is to a continuum of care. Continuum of care means that, you know, once you go through a process of either rehab or MAT or medical assistance treatment, or you go through and you need certain special treatments, we can't expect people after 30 days or 90 days to be able to go back into society and live a normal life and say, you're off on your own. And a continuum of care is where we have this wellness center where they could actually learn to get back on their feet. They have a roof over their head, which is the number one thing. Number two thing, how do we prepare them to get back in society as far as getting a job? And to throw people out 30 days after they are in treatment and think that that's going to solve their problem, our recidivism rate is horrible because people end up going back because the pressures and anxieties of what they just went through come all back to them because they didn't have enough time to even clear their heads and do that. So these wellness centers and the things that we put in place to keep that community care is working. And right now it's only half full. We want to expand it from 300 to 600 beds, but we have to get people into these facilities. And so we're working also looking at the prisons. When people leave prisons, a lot of times they still have addiction issues and other issues. They need a place to go. Can we coordinate this wellness center with those folks to give them so that we could look at them in the sense of how do we guide them to become sustainable citizens of society without throwing them out there and making decisions on their own with no place to live. People are going to do whatever they can to survive. And so these challenges, I think, that we have, and it's a lot of it we call them quality of life issues, but it's really about our citizens in our city that are having challenges that end up impacting our communities negatively because we don't do enough to assist them. So that is still a major goal. The task force for the city is a major goal. You know, we just introduced legislation. It's not really popular, but it's on plastic bags. We had a plastic bag ban, but it's not really being enforced properly. And what we saw when we did the plastic bag ban, we wanted to have a fee on paper bags too, because the goal was to bring your bags to these outlet stores, and so you don't have to get bags. And what we saw is a decrease in plastic bags to a certain extent, but then we saw a major increase in paper bags, right? Which is not what we wanted. And so the goal is that if we believe that they put a fee, we're working with a lot of the businesses and the retail stores to think of how do we do this in a sense that makes it even across the playing field. And the one was just putting a fee on all bags. If you want a bag, you pay for it, except for certain exceptions, food takeout, deliveries, and other things that would come with bags wouldn't have a fee. But they believe that would greatly reduce it. It's been done in other municipalities, greatly reduce the use of paper bags and plastic bags, and then hopefully just have the reusable bags that people could bring using them, you know, 50, 60, 100 times to do that. So that's something that we introduced. It's still a little contentious and we have some back and forth to do. And the last thing I want to say is, I know Paul Stanky mentioned about the Preservation Alliance. I was on the Preservation Alliance the Historic Task Force. And one of the options was, how do we make people more supportive of historic preservation? And we think that by doing that, we did a couple small things, AUs and historic buildings, but one was to tier historic properties to have, right now, you're either historic or you're not. You have certain restrictions and that's it. But we also see a lot of property owners fight that. And we want them to be supportive of it. So if we look at other municipalities that have tier systems where some are maybe the properties can't get demoed till the review. Some are maybe you keep a facade and just the facade is historic, and others are full historic designations. So we're looking hopefully to do something by the end of the year, working with some of the recommendations from the task force, the Preservation Alliance, the Historic Commission, and others to come up with a system to hopefully promote Philadelphia being the first World Heritage City. We should be able to protect our properties and to make sure that historic nature survives, but while also not making it so difficult for property owners to be able to maintain those properties. So that's just a couple things. There's many more, but I know you don't.
So yeah, so let's stick on preservation. I wanted to get your thoughts on the state of the Roundhouse. You know, Paul brought it up. It's a little bit reminiscent of Jewelers Row in that there was a lot of public support for the preservation. In the case of the Roundhouse, a city-led study showed that there was pretty substantial support across pretty much all demographics for preserving the building, yet it failed at the Historic Commission level. So that's a parcel that has been sitting out there since the police decided to move 10 years ago. And there have been no RFPs. There's not been a lot, there's not been plans released from the city. So where do you stand on the preservation of the Roundhouse, and what is your vision for that whole parcel?
As far as the historic designation of it, I mean, Paul and I had many conversations on this. And, one thing that you learn from the Historic Commission is they try not to have political interference, which seemed odd in this case because it seemed like there was some really pressure along the way to do that. I know that sometimes we would send them a letter and John Farnham would say, we don't take too kindly to trying to influence our decisions on these things, right? And I appreciate that and we should respect it because the Historic Commission is not an elected office. They're professional people that look at properties and decide whether it should be historic or not. But even though it wasn't successful, I think the goal is to have an RFP. Now, the RFP isn't being set up. It's going to be, they're supposedly putting a team together through PIDC to put out an RFP. I asked maybe 2 months ago about where are we on that, and that was not a major priority at this point. So I don't believe it's going to be at least this year. And I'm not sure about next year to put an RFP out for that property. But I think that my opinion to the administration was, if you do an RFP and it's not historic, deemed historic or designated historic, can you put an RFP out and say, what are your ideas for reuse of this property? What are your ideas of having that land to do whatever you want with it? And what is your ideas to reuse the property and reuse the land? Because actually there's enough space there to do both if you want. And I think, now I don't know how many you said, Paul, you got 30, 31, and that's for reuse, right? Reuse proposals. So to me, if our RFP would give the opportunity, even though it's not specifically designated, give the opportunity to have people propose a reuse for that. And, we have some people in the community that are interested in affordable housing and other things there, but there's enough space there where I think you could do both. Like you could have a reuse of that property and still build some of the things that the community has interest in on that site. But it's really, the key is going to be how this RFP is going to be put together and what that looks like at the end.
So then a question on time. Why are these things taking so long at this particular moment? We referenced, Market East and you and I were talking about this a year ago and we're pushing and trying to see if there are ideas that could be implemented. We talk about the police leaving the building or making the decision to leave the building 10 years ago. What are the barriers specifically in Philadelphia to making these processes just happen faster?
Initially, I thought the delay was whether it was going to be historic or not, because that was under the previous administration, right? They were holding off to say, all right, if it's historic, we'll do one thing. If it's not historic, we'll do something else. But honestly, why it's taking so long, I don't have an answer. I don't know why it would take so long. I know we had some changes in the Planning Commission. We now have Jesse Lawrence, who's the head of planning in the city of Philadelphia. And I know we were waiting for somebody to take the lead there in order to move these processes forward. And, as a city, you could do more than one thing at a time. You could have people, right, work on one thing and have them dedicated to that, but have other people work on something else. And it seems like and I'm not speaking bad against the administration, but it seems like it's not that focus at this point on those planning processes. Even, I know you're going to get into the bus terminal part, right? You talk about planning process. there was a planning process 15 years ago or 10 years ago about 30th Street Station being a hub. The city knew 5 or 6 years ago that Greyhound no longer was going to own any of their properties, right? Flex bought them. They saw the value in real estate, and transportation was the other value, but they saw more value in the real estate. So they were getting rid of their real estate, and the city knew that was going to happen. And the planning process that talked about 30th Street, I think sort of got delayed. And so what happened was we just didn't do anything. We didn't have any other plan. When that building eventually, when Greyhound eventually dropped their lease, the city just reacted to it. It wasn't a planned process, right? They put them on Market Street first. That didn't work. Now they put them on Spring Garden Street. That's not working, right? So that's what's so important about design advocacy, planning, and that planning process needs to be done immediately. Now, we did get a grant for DVRPC to do a study, and from what we understand, in the fall, which is today, we're supposed to get 5 or 6 temporary locations and 1 permanent location that the city's looking for the Greyhound terminal. We haven't got that yet. The study, I believe, may be done, but I can't answer why it's taken so long. I think we need to be able to multitask and do multiple things. Initially, I was given a little credit because it took some time to put the planning department together, and now you have new leadership. But we need to really act on these things, especially on East Market and the and the Greyhound station, because there are 2 things that impact next year for 2026, but long term, right? And we need to have 2 plans. We need to make sure, what are we doing next year, and what are we going to do long term? Nobody believes a city that says this is just temporary if you don't have a long term vision. If you can't show a plan with drawings, nobody believes that. So it's really important for us to do that, and we really got to get on the ball and work with the administration to make sure that this happens now, immediately, so that we can move forward on a process that makes sense.
So when Jesse was here with us at DAG, he talked about any sort of transit station as the city's handshake to visitors, and that we needed to extend a good positive handshake. We have one at the airport, we have one at 30th Street, and the bus station now is not that. So 2026 planning, is that something that is realistic, that temporary solution is going to be up and running in 2026? And then just generally, can you talk a little bit more about 2026 planning and where you feel the city is, both relative to your expectations and in relationship to our other peer cities up and down the East Coast?
Let me just say this first. I am a fan ambassador, so I did join. I'm one of the 5,000 that are there. Hopefully other people will join. We need people who really love the city to be able to showcase it and share why we love it. But 2026, I do believe we could do it. We need to act now. We needed to act 6 months ago. Not for the party planning and not for that stuff. That is in process, and they have Philly 250 working with the visitor centers, PHLCVB, Visit Philly. They're working, they're meeting, there's going to be events in all communities throughout the city of Philadelphia and the major events downtown here. So 2026 is going to be something that I think is going to be great. The city is welcoming everybody to come here to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our country. But it's not only that, it's all the other events that are leading up to that. And the city wants to have stuff from, New Year's Day, all the way through to the end of the summer. And to do that takes a lot of organization and cooperation. We had the PA 250, Philadelphia 250, led by Catherine Level, who's also the head of the visitor center. And the big thing is how do we incorporate the entire city in the celebration, not just Center City, but our visitors. We want them to go visit our neighborhoods, because what makes Philadelphia great is a city of neighborhoods, and you can see how people live. But we also want to make sure we have our Center City tight. We want to make sure that we have the events that are here are not only well done, but people feel safe. The main thing that people are going to tell you, if they don't feel safe, people won't want to live here, people don't want to work here, and people aren't going to want to visit here, right? So as part of the planning process for 2026 events is the security of it. The city, the council put money into the budget last year to add additional resources, infrastructure, meridian barriers, things like that for when you have events to try to keep them safe. You know that there's always somebody out there that may try to disrupt that, right? So you want to make sure that we have enough resources in place and can work with our state police, city police, and even our park services, right, folks? Work with Senate City District, SEPTA, our hospital police, and get everybody right now working on the same page of how we coordinate efforts to make sure people are safe during these events. And so that process is ongoing. But as far as the planning process for like East Market, it hasn't started yet. It should have started where we say, all right, we're asking the people who bought these buildings on East Market Street, we're asking them to demo them, and then we could have a big open space where we could have all kind of events. We tenant, we have everything there for the whole summer. Or we're asking them, don't demo it, clean it up, and let us use pop-ups for the street, right? Whatever the plan calls for. We don't have that yet, right? This is end of September. We are starting in January. We need to know that. So this has to happen right now. And I guess we could be part of the blame because, you know, trying to work on this, we were trying to work on it together with council and the administration. But at this point, if we don't have anything by the next week or two announced, we're going to have to just create it on our own. And then at least with the East Market Street study to start that process.
Can you talk a little bit about that East Market Street process, both in terms of, I think the biggest concern that a lot of us have are who the stakeholders are, whether that stakeholder group, I guess I'm going to stop talking and just say, who do you consider to be the stakeholders for Market East?
I want to say, I don't know if you remember when they did the master plan for the Central Delaware, right? Harris Steinberg put together the William Penn Foundation, put some money into it. The city put some money into it. The City Planning Commission was involved, but it was led by a sort of a third-party process that had community input, right? It looked at the Central Delaware from one side to the other and included something created called CDAG, right? Central Delaware Advocacy Group, which was representatives from every RCO along the river. And I remember that because I was president of Whitman Council, which is down the southern end, and we were a part of that conversation, along with property owners, right, who were stakeholders, along with the City of Philadelphia Planning, Commerce Department, the chambers, the civic associations, SEPTA, PACO, and we wanted that was an executive order by the Mayor Street at that time. That was done through the request of Councilmember Chico before I got there. But when I came in and we saw the master plan when it was completed, it actually gave you a vision of what the Central Delaware could look like. The main focus was the trail, right? Trying to get a certain amount of feet, 50 feet from the river, connector streets from the city to the river. How do we then make sure we have connector streets all the way down? That vision led to a lot of the planning process. I know Joe Forkin is going to come, so I won't get too deep into the cap and the things like that. But I remember when that first came out, people said, that's pie in the sky. None of that will never happen. You have all individual property owners along the river. They're never going to all agree on the same thing, right? But what had happened, DRWC, we had a leaguer, Joe Forkin, Delaware River Waterfront Corporation, was been able to go and work with William Penn Foundation, Knight Foundation, and others to get resources to actually purchase properties or lease properties to continue that trail all the way down. So you connected the whole trail. But the property owners saw a benefit in having this also. They saw that it could actually increase the value of their properties and makes not only the people of their properties enjoy the waterfront, but it has the community connected to that to make them enjoy it too. So the stakeholders have to be a list of city departments, transportation, RCOs, planners and designers, architects, and to be able to meet and come up with, if you saw the booklet, it's about that thick, the Central Delaware plan. And I always remember that because everybody always flipped in the front of it, always had the cap on there that was never going to happen. And I remember working for trying to find money for that. And we were able to get $90 million from the city. That's very difficult to get $90 million in a specific council district for a park project when you need parks throughout the city. So we had to do a lot of convincing, look at the economic impacts. How do we challenge, how do we use our city tax dollars when we don't know the return at that point, right? But since then, we see the activities on the Central Delaware. We saw the RFPs. Some of the development has slowed down recently, but if you look at all the development along the river, a lot of that has to do with the Central Delaware plan, because we were able to see a plan, see pictures, have developers understand what is going to be expected from them before they even start the process. How does this fit into a plan? And the last thing we did was codify that plan into legislation. We did a Central Delaware overlay, so that would, certain height limits, density bonuses are different things that we wanted to add into that to let developers know what is expected of them before they start. Instead of having developers come in and say, this is what I'm going to do, pat me on the back, thank you, and move on, right? So the planning process is so important, and I would like it to model and mirror what they did in the Central Delaware plan.
So pivoting down to Deep South Philly, you talked about an excellent planning process on the Delaware. We've had a pretty disastrous process for 76th Place on Market East. What have you learned from that Market East 76th Place process that you're gonna, that you and the city are going to bring down to that new stadium and that new stadium district? Because we being the city has some control in that the teams have to come to PIDC for development rights.
We learned a lot. That was very trying times. That was really, I think, as a council member, a very difficult process that we went through, trying to understand, first of it, what was being proposed, how that would mesh with our public transit system, right? How we could try to understand what impacts it would have on the surrounding communities, how the communities looked at not only what would happen if the arena is there, but how they looked at their communities right now, right? What their challenges were right now. So we learned a lot from that process. And we also learned that there's a community benefits agreement that should come from any type of development that's this big and this impactful. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, South Philly has all the stadiums, it's no change. It's fine, they don't really need to do anything different. I disagree, because anytime you put something new, and at this point, from what I understand, I didn't see any proposals yet for the new arena, but they're not knocking down the old arena anytime soon. So they're going to have the two arenas that are going to be operating simultaneously. And when you do that, even with the conversation of a new Eagles Stadium that you didn't mention, but is in conversation right now, that puts a lot of pressure on that surrounding community, because not only will you have two arenas that would take up additional parking, but now you're going to talk about construction possibly in the 30s of a new stadium, 50,000, maybe domed or roofed or whatever it may look like. And so that's a major impact that I think, even though it's not in my district, it's in Councilmember Johnson's district, it impacts the communities surrounding that. And we need to listen to those concerns and look at that planning process. Now, Comcast has a plan also for all the parking lots. I don't know if you saw that during the Sixers conversation. They came with a plan. They were going to build up a lot of mixed use, hotels, retail, residential. And the community needs to understand, what is that planned in conjunction with these new arenas? And when you're talking about a community benefits agreement, how do you deal with that, right? Because eventually, are you eliminating all the parking there and just make it a transit place for arenas and stadiums down there? So it's going to be a tough road to hoe. It's not going to be as easy as people think. And I think we need to look at it in the sense that this cannot just be for the arena folks. It has to be able to improve the quality of life of the fans and the people who go there and the access to that location, but also the quality of life of the people who are close by.
So speaking of that and making sure that there's a quality of life maintained, I think there's a little disconnect with folks downtown who are saying, well, what about our quality of life when 76th Place, was brought into the community? So what steps are you taking? What steps is the city taking to reconnect with Chinatown, to reconnect with the Wash West and all those neighbors who may have those feelings of, hey, wait a second, what about our quality of life? What about what we have to say?
Right, and I think that's why we had all those meetings, and that's why we when we had the CBA, I don't know if you remember, the original CBA hardly had any dollars for the immediate community, right? There was a lot of money being projected citywide in the CBA. We went to the mayor and say, hey, listen, we cannot do this or even possibly even introduce it without a CBA that included what we heard from the community and their concerns. Major concerns was public safety, right? That was the number one concern before even traffic, right? Traffic, parking was number two, but public safety was number one because there was a challenge with that. So one of the things that we were going to do in the CBA was open up a public safety hub. It was going to be 11th and Market that the team was going to pay for. It was going to be a collaboration between Jefferson, SEPTA, Center City District, Philadelphia Police, and CCD. And they were going to man that area there and have surround about a 4-block radius of really public safety attention, right? Also lighting and then cleaning, because they all go together. Public safety, if you're looking at public safety, it's just not policing, right? It was upgrade in lighting, upgrade in cleaning. And so that was all going to be contributed from the CBA. But because the CBA is no longer there, doesn't mean a lot of those things that we heard, which was fears from the community, just went away, right? The other thing was affordability of living. A lot of people believe that if the arena came here, a lot of the values of those properties would skyrocket. People would want to live nearby. People would want to have their businesses nearby. Therefore, chasing the businesses out, the current businesses that were there, and also making it unaffordable for people who currently live there. So as part of the CBA, the mayor proposed a $20 million influx in affordable housing dollars just for Chinatown. Now, that did not go away when the arena went away. That commitment of $20 million for Chinatown is still in there. And the first start of that was to be able to transfer the 6th District Police Station to PCDC, Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation, who now has an application in to build 43 affordable units on that site, supported by the city and hopefully supported by PHFA from the state to do that. They also built an affordable senior project on 9th and Vine with Penrose that has since opened up. And they are looking at the other parcels on that, which is city-owned. Now, it's a little bit of a difficult site because there's a lot of easements underground for underground transportation. So you only could piece that parcel into a couple different things. But the commitment from the city is still there for $21 million of affordable housing. And the last thing that we did was we created what we called a Chinatown overlay. People were fearing that they would buy up 3 or 4 buildings, open up these big establishments that would be maybe sports bars or other entertainment venues that would be close to the city. So we put everything over either 25, I forget, it was 2,500 or 3,000 square feet, would automatically need a variance. So if anybody tried to open up something that was big or combine properties to do that, they couldn't do it by right, even though it was zoned CMX 5, right? Normally, they would just be able to buy those 3, combine the properties, do what they want, and open up. This allowed the community input in that process so that the goal was to keep all small business storefronts in Chinatown, which is mostly is now. There are some bigger venues and some banquet halls there, but the goal was to keep small businesses in there. That overlay is still in effect, right? Wash West, during the process of the arena talks, was how do we look to make it a historic district to put some protections in place, right? That too has since passed, right? That is now an historic district to help preserve some of the fears that people had. But not only that, we committed to the cleanup. TCB, Taking Care of Business, is a mayor proposal where they work for giving grants through commerce to community corridors that have business corridors in them. That money is now funding both Chinatown and Wash West to have regular everyday cleanings where people will come by and sweep up and do the sidewalks. So I know people don't think, because certain things you hear, that nobody was listening to anybody who was, opposed to the arena. We did listen to them, and some of these things we incorporated into the CBA, even though the arena didn't come there, we're still doing today because of the concerns that the community had. Now, the only thing we don't have is the public safety station that was going to be 11th and Market, was going to be in the Jefferson building. But it's not public information yet. The convention center is in the process of consolidating the head house, which is, where, I don't know if people knew where the field house was on behind, right across from the Reading terminal. They will control the head house now. That was a really complicated process where we had Macerich was part owner, Marriott was part owner, PRA was part owner, and the convention center was part owner. The convention center is now going to, a couple more legal things to clear, but they're going to now control that. And that is going to be a safety hub that is going to be there for both the Chinatown and Center City District community. So a lot of the ideas that came through all those meetings and conversations are still moving forward, even without the money from the CBA that was going to pay for it initially. So we still found a way to do some of those things, even without the CBA that we crafted together to care for those communities, or at least to hear what they had to say. Maybe they still were upset that it went forward, but we were trying to put those things in place, knowing what their concerns were.
I want to leave time for Q&A, but just sort of my last question is, okay, so we're moving into 2026, all the things we've talked about. What's realistic in the 6 to 12 month time frame to actually accomplish, and what are your priorities over the next year?
Well, we did put, in the last budget, I put $1.8 million into at least for signage, planning, landscaping for East Market Street. So there is money in there that's going to be run by Center City District and some of the property owners to go through what that wayfinding looks like, what the landscaping looks like, and some other things just to beautify. So there is some things already started and being worked on. As far as East Market Street, I think it's still up in the air if, are those properties going to be demoed? Are they going to be kept and used as pop-ups? Working with Commerce to beautify any vacant buildings with possibly mural arts or some other art installations that we could put in vacant buildings. But the goal is try to get those buildings actually used, working with some of the landlords to say, hey, is it possible? A lot of them write them off when they're vacant, right? So keep them vacant, make a donation. You could still write them off, but we could have maybe 6 months use of it for a pop-up, right? And they could still get the same write-off they had if it was vacant because they're donating it. So these are the things we're working with Commerce. I think those things can be done. I'm not sure what's going to happen with the buildings that Comcast bought and 76ers bought, but I want to have those conversations. I want to have that committee task force make a recommendation on what they think would be best, right? So that we could then say, all right, starting in December or maybe in January, I would love to have them knocked down by January, right? If that's what the recommendation was, or can we use them as pop-up opportunities on those, or maybe do half and half, knock down a couple of them, pop up the rest, right? So I do believe I think next year is going to be really exciting. And listen, we welcome people, and we talk about, the things that are going on today about freedom of speech, freedom to protest, all those things, they have to be supported here in Philadelphia, right? We're the city of democracy. You're allowed to say what you think is wrong. You're allowed to hold the sign up and you're allowed to protest. Those things should be welcomed in there. And one thing the mayor said, which I liked, welcome the protest. If you want to burn a car down or you want to loot a store, that's a crime. That's not a protest. That will be addressed properly, right? I think those messages we welcome you. We want you. Come here, share your voice, put up your signs, have your protest. That's going to bring people in to come and eat, have a good time, you know, but note that there also is law and order. Now that's a thin line to walk, right? But we have to make sure that I agree with that message. If you're going to come here and you think you're going to burn our stores down or loot them, then there's going to be a consequence to that behavior, right? And I really believe that different than from 1976, I wasn't here in 1776, but 1976, where we sort of chasing people away saying, don't come here or you're going to get locked up. That's not the message right now, right? We're still a welcoming city. We want everybody to come here. And I think we want them to enjoy themselves. But what we really want them to do is go back and tell everybody else how great Philadelphia was, how walkable it was, how great their food was, how much fun it was. And they're the things about having the ambassadors and others to be able to greet people when they come here and making sure that they also have the freedom to do what is right by the Constitution and our Declaration. So I'm excited about it. I do believe that it's going to be a great year next year. And I think we're going to have good resources and hopefully a big return in tax dollars. I mean, I'm on the convention center board, looking at the conventions throughout the year, the city's going to be full with just conventions, let alone FIFA and other things. So we're going to have a lot of people here in the city of Philadelphia. And I know when you talk about people coming from other countries, they use public transit, right? They don't come here and drive all around. They're looking for how do I get from one place to the next way through public transit. And, you know, we're working with SEPTA. We got to clean that up. We got to do some other things. I don't know if you noticed now, some things on PACO, they're cleaning that up every night now. Every night they go through, their power washing, cleaning it. They're actually closing the stairways and cleaning them, making it better. So there are things that are starting to happen. So I'm excited about it. I think there's going to be a lot of great things in the city. And I want to thank the mayor and administration for really putting that forward. And hopefully council is pushing the envelope to add even additional dollars so we could have additional events here throughout the city.
So let me know who has questions. I'll move around the room and try to hit as many as possible.
Hi. I'm just wondering how much of, and I loved I followed that whole thing with the arena and, you know, and then there was a surprise change that nobody knew about. It's what behind my question. I am wondering how much of the real estate developers who are behind a whole lot of things are running you mentioned John Fry. Well, John Fry was at Drexel, and then there were hospitals closing around in there. And when I look at University of the Arts, as soon as I saw somebody, and I'm a horrible person with names, there was somebody on their board who was involved with all the developers and and there's all those historic buildings that University of the Arts was, you know, owned and was sitting on. I have a question about how much the developers are coming around and then just altering all of your plans and doing what they're going to do. And it's got to do with them, not Philadelphia and not us.
I think it's a great question. And I don't know if I mentioned John Fry or not, but I do want to say that that's what's key about having the planning process and then codifying that with some type of legislation, because that allows the developers to understand what we as a city are looking for. We accept this plan, then we want them to try to adhere to it. It's not to say you can't change something or you can't alter it, but we want them to know what is expected of them. Developers or property owners, they need to be part of the process, right? But they shouldn't lead the process, sort of what happened with the arena, and saying, this is what we're doing and it doesn't matter, and thank us for it. Like we saw East Market, we saw a great development on East Market. That East Market development that's there right now that they built, they opened up Cuthbert Street, they made it more inviting, they made it pedestrian friendly. right? They're the type of things that, now the developer did that on his own. It wasn't a planning process, but we loved it, right? But I think with a planning process and having a plan that's codified within legislation is important to make sure that it's not led from the top down, that it's led from the bottom up.
With your discussion of the Greyhound bus terminal and like how how it was known for years in advance that Philly might lose its intercity bus terminal, and like then it's just people hanging out on a street waiting for it. Why do you think, like with that or other issues, planning in Philadelphia has been so reactionary, like not even having a plan when something unwanted happens and then having to develop something, which then means like many years later after the unfortunate event happens is when there's a plan and not like alternatives in advance?
From what I understand is they did have a plan initially knowing that that was going to happen, and it was 30th Street. But from what we're hearing is the plan sort of wouldn't work immediately because there's some infrastructures with the bridge over 30th Street, and I'm not sure of what technically has to be done, but they have to repair that infrastructure over the bridge before they could do anything else either underneath or around 30th Street. So I think instead of coming up with an alternative plan until that was done, we dropped the ball. So I'm not going to make an excuse for that. We didn't have an alternative plan knowing that this was eventually going to happen, right? Flex told everybody that they were their model no longer owns bus terminals. But we as a city should have said, well, that could be your model, but we're a city and you have to have a bus terminal if you want to operate. Now, we can't stop buses. I think, you know, Transportation Authority would probably get upset if we said you can't come to Philadelphia with your bus. But we have to say, if you want to work in Philadelphia, you got to rent at this location or you got to do this. We could do that because, and plus, I think they want to be in a place that's nice. I mean, I ride by Spring Garden Street now and I see people sitting out there with bags and training out and all this other stuff. It's horrible, right? And this is the first supposed to be a world-class city. So I think we dropped the ball. I mean, there was a plan that they had, but once they realized it wouldn't be done by the time they were leaving, they never came up with an alternative plan. And that was, you know, under the previous administration, I wish we would have known that they knew that this was going to happen in 3 or 5 years, but they just never had an alternative plan. And that's why when DVRPC gave us some money to do a study, one of the things I pushed for was temporary, permanent, right? Nobody's going to believe a temporary, everybody's going to fight that temporary plan because they know it might, if nobody complains, they keep it there forever, right? That's why we need to have both. And I agree with it, but I just think we dropped the ball. That's the best answer I have.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for coming. I live in the Northeast, but I spent a lot of time in Center City.
Yes.
Can you hear? Now, for 3 years now, I know the construction is not in your district, but for 3 years, every time I have to come into Center City, I'm in traffic jams because of the 95 construction up, you know, like where the major construction's happening around Allegheny Avenue and so forth.
It's coming south. It'll be down our way.
All right, now, yeah. Now, if you're talking about next year, you have people, a lot of people coming from New York, New England, whatever, coming down. They're going to be stuck in traffic every time they come down. They're going to let their, you know, families know and so forth. This is ridiculous. And especially traffic is going to be twice as bad with all the tourists trying to come down. Do you have any idea when that construction is going to be finished? Now, I'm saying that, you know, that Cottonman Avenue business with the truck that was on fire.
Right.
When you wanted to get it done, it got done. You need to want to get this done before the spring of next year, or it's going to be a total mess.
There's two things I want to say about that. One is that PennDOT is doing it. It's going to take like 15 years, probably longer to go all the way down, maybe even 20 years. We had meetings in South Philadelphia several months ago about changing the on-ramps and when that's going to start, but they're saying that's not going to start for 10 years. So they have to finish that along with the cap before they move south. Two things that we're doing as a city. One is during 2026, we're trying to get a lot of the streets done now. It is a mess out there, but we're trying to get a lot of streets done because there's going to be a limited number of work that's going to be approved, except for emergency during 2026. Normally we have a moratorium around the holiday season when everybody's shopping and you don't want to close the street for shoppers and things like that. But there's going to be a moratorium for 2026 in that the summer that most projects are going to stop. And they're going to make sure that whatever has to get done gets done before that. That's the plan. We'll see how it works out, but that's the plan right now. As far as PennDOT, and that's not going to be done. None of that work's going to be done. We're hoping that the roads could be open, working with PennDOT to make sure that they could leave the roads open during our summer season. But that's also the best time they have the work. So it's going to be a little bit, it's not going to be as bad as it was. And I think a lot of those lanes are now open in that area. You still have a couple on-ramps that are being worked in the northern end, but that work is going to come down south and affect the people down south. And I mean, we'll try to work with PennDOT the best we can on that. But as far as the city streets and all, a lot of stuff got pushed up to get done before next year. So sometimes you'll see 5 streets all broken up at the same time. That usually never happens, but hopefully we see the light at the end of the tunnel and that a lot of that moratorium for next summer will take place. So you won't see all that work being done in the summertime of next year.
Okay, Councilman Mark Squilla, I have a question. RCO means what in the what's it, the acronym? Or what does that mean?
Registered Community Organization.
Right. One of my questions is, do you see for 2026 an opportunity for new ideas, for new innovations in the city with young people when it comes to RCOs and every community throughout the city of Philadelphia, somehow promoting some form of something new for the city of Philadelphia that's a change from the direction, or maybe piggyback on the fact that founders of this country and things like that we can fall back on. Do you think that would be a great idea for a lot of the RCOs throughout the city of Philadelphia, like the newer ideas?
Absolutely. I mean, our RCOs are, especially in my district, they're very active and they're very, they voice their opinions. So I'm very aware of them, and they are also active in this planning process. There's going to be events in all neighborhoods throughout the city. I don't know what RCOs like outside my district, but I know they reached out to me and we connected them with Philly 250, Catherine Ottrell's group, and they want to help and organize. They want to do events. They want the city to help fund some of those events. So we put them together, those community groups, with Philly 250 to promote what they want to do, whether they're going to have whatever celebration it may be. It might even be just a fall festival or something like that celebrating 2026. But yes, that is a big deal. And even the mayor wants not celebrations only in Center City. She wants them citywide, and that everybody who participates in the city can have an event in or near their community to go to so they don't have to leave their neighborhood. So thank you. Yes.
Thank you for coming to speak and sharing some updates on Market East. You mentioned that Jerry Sweeney was appointed into a leadership position, but is not demonstrating that leadership, and that you may introduce a resolution to initiate the planning process. Could you speak more to the timeline on that and who would be accountable or the leader of that planning process?
The Jerry Sweeney was appointed. I didn't say he wasn't doing his job. I just said that it hasn't started yet. So I don't know the reason why it hasn't started. But you know, I met with him. He had some nice ideas of what he expected. I'm sure he's waiting on direction of how to move forward. But the model I would have would be similar to the model of the Central Delaware plan, right? Where it would be led by somebody like Penn Practice or Lindy or another organization. Money could be paid for by William Penn Foundation, who's offered to do some funding for this study, right? And then driven by a community process. And then at the end of the day, put out recommendations on what they would like to see, both short-term and long-term. So, I mean, the process, I don't have a leader. Obviously, the Philadelphia Planning Commission will be part of that process because they need to be if we're going to implement those changes. But I do believe it has to be an all-inclusive group of folks, including the property owners, right, and the RCOs, to make sure that everybody's voice is heard in the process. Because you're not going to make everybody's going to want different things along the way. But at the end of the day, even with the Central Delaware process, they put a whole plan together on what they believe could be built, what could be developed. They actually had scales of buildings, some higher, some lower, right? They did all that to give an idea of what would be accepted or what the city. And then once that happened, I went in and then tried to do legislation to codify that so that the developers would know. And we added bonuses and things like that. So they could, if they wanted to go above it, they might have to build out a trail. If they want, they might have had to add art. They might have had to do certain things if they wanted to go what we perceive to be the limit. And so I would like to see that in the Market East study, and having, you know, the RCOs as part of that process. But again, the key is it has to happen immediately. I would think by the end of October, we have to have a planning process started. That's my opinion.
Hi, Councilman. Thank you for coming to speak and share. I think it was really interesting to hear you talk about the city knowing that the bus station or Greyhound would renew for 5 to 6 years beforehand. I think it was really interesting to hear you talk about the Central Delaware Valley plan. It's also a little disappointing because you knew about how things should go, right? You knew about what parties should be involved, and yet you still voted for the stadium, right? So if there was a planning process involved, if you knew how things should go, right, then shouldn't you have voted against, right? So my question is, if you are saying that developers now should be a part of the planning process and you're creating a planning process for Market East now, will you keep those developers to that planning process and those expectations because you are our representation?
First of all, we supported the arena process, the arena proposal, after meeting with the communities and hearing all their concerns and putting what we believed were safeguards in place to address those concerns that we heard. So that was part of what we explained earlier. And so by doing that, we were still able to continue to do that today, even though the arena is not going there. So that was the benefit of listening to the community. Maybe you don't agree with the final decision, and that's okay. You don't have to agree with the decision, or that, you know, people didn't like my position on that, and that's fine. But to say that we didn't take those things into consideration during that process would be untrue, because we did take those concerns that we heard, even with traffic concerns. And when we changed the legislation so that the 76ers have to pay for public transit if they didn't reach their goals of 40% public transit riders. That was not part of the original legislation. But what we heard from the community is, where are all these people going to park? We wanted to hold them accountable to make sure they would pay. Every ticket would have a public transit pass on it so that people would take it. And if they didn't do it, they'd have to pay the next year, right? So they did not want to pay for public transit. So we knew they would work with us, putting a plan together to do that. And when we did the public transit plan, we included everybody in that plan and codified that in the legislation for the arena, where you would have SEPTA, PATCO, the community groups, Otis, the police department, the fire department, to look at all the travel radiuses, because we heard concerns about public safety, about the hospital, all these other things. We met with municipalities that have arenas near hospitals to go over what they did different and when they didn't, you know, and we were told that even during like arena times, there were special dedicated lanes for emergency vehicles during these arena times in other municipalities. So we took, it wasn't like we weren't listening. Did we vote for something that a large majority of the people were opposed to? Yes, we did do that. And we did it because we also knew that challenges of East Market Street were almost unsurmountable. And we looked at it as a possible opportunity to generate interest. And from that interest came, even though the arena is going down in South Philadelphia, maybe that's the best place for it. But we now have somebody who bought up a lot of those dilapidated, abandoned buildings, who hopefully could work with a planning process to redevelop Market Street. And we would have never had that if we didn't go through that process. So to say that we didn't listen to folks, or we didn't take what they said as concerning, we did. We just, at the end of the day, we voted on something based on all the information we had. And it wasn't a popular decision by a lot of folks. But, you know, as an elected official, a lot of times you can't just take a stand and say, whoever's the loudest or whoever the most people are, I want to get elected next time, so I'll just not do this. And it's easier. If everybody did that, then we would have nothing. Because I go to community groups all the time, and every development there, half the people want one thing, half the people want something else. You have to make a decision on what it is, and you're going to make half the people mad, right? But you have to make that decision knowing that, yeah, half of them are going to vote against you next time or be mad at you. And that's okay, because you made a decision based on the information that you had, based on the facts that you received. Maybe it's not popular, but if I'm only here to make popular votes, then I don't think you want a representative to do that either. So yeah, it was tough. Yeah, was there a lot of opposition to it? Absolutely. But I think at the end of the day, by listening to those concerns, we were able to put a lot of things in place to hopefully make those communities a better place, whether the arena went there or now that it didn't. And so I will continue that. And I know it's not popular, and I go to some meetings and people still holler at me about it, but you know, it is what it is.
Thanks. Thank you again for speaking to us and sharing all your thoughts. I've lived in the city for a long time, and I find it really interesting that you bring up all these different plans, Central Delaware Plan, Philadelphia 2035. And I think back to Jewelers Row, because the Central Philadelphia plan was passed 2 years before the demolition permits were filed for those Jewelers Row properties. You had 2 years to introduce legislation to downzone Sansom Street from CMX5 to a more appropriate height. And if that was sort of the by right reason that Toll Brothers could go in and demolish these very historically significant buildings, and you refused to use your councilman prerogative to, you know, delay the project or stall it or anything, you know, I kind of wonder what the whole point of any planning process is, because if we're going to delay any sort of zoning recommendation by years, then by that time, there will already be a new planning process started for the same area. And, you know, I am a constituent in your district, not only because my residence is there, but because I work at 7th and Chestnut, and I walk by the toll hole every day. And it enrages me that in 2026, when we should be celebrating America's history, that these tourists are going to be looking at a big hole where, you know, demolition could have been stalled. There was no reason for bulldozers to go in there. It was only for egos. And I just want to express my disappointment with that.
All right, thank you. You want me to say anything? All right. First of all, there was never a request to do any downzoning. And when you downzone a property, well, if it was in the 25, then why it didn't happen, I'm not sure, because it's led by the Planning Commission and they give us the proposals. Once planning is done with those studies, they forward them to us to introduce. So well, the legislation is drafted by the administration and recommended by planning. They would, if they really wanted that, they would have forwarded us that legislation to do it. So any legislation that we do, like even when we codified the Central Delaware Plan, that was done by planning. They wrote the legislation. We had meetings and discussions with developers and community groups and CDAG. They make the recommendation. They send that over to council to be introduced. So, I mean, if every recommendation that we have to go through there, if it was just on paper, I mean, I don't know how we would introduce all those legislation. I'm sure there's other legislation in other areas that wasn't done. 2035, we remapped basically mostly the whole city. So I'm sure we remapped some areas around there that were done and that were given to us by planning. So I'm sure that whether it was Society Hill, Wash West, and other places got remapped at that same time that were given to us. So I'm glad you support council matter prerogative, but at the end of the day, we only could do or introduce, what is supported by planning and as they give them to us. When we have a planning process as far as the demo, I mean, that was fall pretty stringently on historic certification. They were able to get past that because they had pulled the demo permit before. I mean, Paul would know a little bit more about that process because we were in a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings during that time. And there would have been a perfect example, I think, where we could have probably had, if we had a tier system at that time, that's a perfect example. If we had a tiered system at that time, I think that we probably could have did something to, well, I mean, if you believe it deserves the full thing, then it would, right now it's a historic district. So, it's nominated for a historic district. They do not want to be an historic district. I mean, you could want that, but I think the community should have a say in that. So if they don't want to be designated as a historic district because you want it to be an historic district, I think that they should have a little bit more to say than whether that's a historic district or not. We proposed a historic district for Chinatown even during the arena conversations, but there was some people who wanted it, but majority people did not want that. And a lot of it was because a lot of those property owners are Chinese owners. And they felt by doing that would, again, if we had some other methods of looking at it, we might be able to convince them, but they believe that would reduce the value of their properties and therefore did not want to be an historic district. If you have people who want to have an historic district like Wash West did, that was supported and it was passed, led by their community.
I'm going to close us out.
Thank you very much for being here and taking these questions. This may sound like inside baseball, but I think it's an important question about why it takes so long to get anything done. As you know, DAG has for years looked at the size of the Planning Commission staff and said it's way too small compared to our peers like Boston and San Francisco. However, if you took, we have a lot of other agencies. We have, PHA, PHDC, OHCD, the Land Bank, and there's one that we don't talk about too much. Council has their own separate planning function.
That's new.
That's relatively new. And it was presumably created because they weren't satisfied with what they were getting from somewhere else. But we're paying for all that. Between the businesses and the citizens, we're paying for that. So two-part question. If you were the czar of planning in Philadelphia, how would you consider restructuring it? And if you think it needs it? And secondly, have you been satisfied with the work that the council planning division has been doing?
All right, two things. One is, I would like to see the numbers of the size of planning departments. If you could forward them to me to try to really understand the difference of them. I would agree. There's so many things going on, and maybe it is that you only could put so much emphasis on each thing because you're doing so many different things at the same time. Maybe we do have to increase our planning staff. The council planning is new under Councilmember Johnson that was brought up. It was a big asset to me, even during the arena conversations, because there was a lot of not great communication between the city planning, even though they work for us, and to try to understand all the challenges, even especially during the CBA conversations, right? We had to try to, pull money back off the CBA in order to make sure the community was taken care of in that process. So the city planning planners that we could go to and bounce things off was very helpful because they were only work for us. They don't work for the whole city and they weren't tied into doing projects for everybody. So to me, I'm going to say it was beneficial to be able to bounce things off of, especially since one of the people who works for us now had worked for the Planning Commission for before. So they sort of knew a lot of the ins and outs that were able to direct us with possible ideas. And even when we were looking at overlays when we were doing overlays into Chinatown and looking for protections, you know, it was great to be able to bounce things off the Planning Commission who was working for us, right? As we talk to other planning commissions, you know, in other municipalities when we're getting ideas on what to do to put protections in place. So I think it's beneficial. Is it additional staff that council pays for? That's additional tax dollars, yes. But, you know, maybe if the city did have a full functioning planning commission that could work on a lot of different things all at the same time, maybe then council wouldn't need it.
We are at time, so I know there are a lot of questions we didn't get to.
I could stay afterwards too if people want to ask me questions.
Councilman Squilla, thank you for taking the time to come.
All right, thank you.